The following is independent geopolitical analysis and personal opinion only. I am not a journalist, intelligence official, or government representative. All claims are based on publicly available reporting. Something just shifted in the Russia-Iran relationship, and most analysts are completely missing what it means. Everyone is focused on drones, shades, the obvious stuff. But in my analysis, the drone story is already old news. What's happening right now quietly, under the radar, goes far deeper. And if I'm right, it changes the entire strategic picture across the Middle East. Because here's the thing. When a story gets repeated enough times, people stop questioning it. They accept the frame. Drones from Iran. Russia uses them in Ukraine. Story over. But that framing is frozen in 2022, and we are not in 2022 anymore. The question nobody is asking is this: what is Russia giving back? Because in geopolitics, nothing is free. Every relationship has a ledger. And when you look closely at what's been quietly reported, not in the big headlines, but in sanctions filings, think tank briefings, and intelligence community statements, the ledger tells a very different story than the one most people are carrying around. In their heads, let's start with what we publicly know, the basics, so everyone's on the same page. According to reporting from Reuters, the Wall Street Journal, and multiple European intelligence assessments, Russia and Iran have been deepening their military cooperation since at least 2022, when Iran began supplying Russia with Shahd series loitering munitions, essentially kamikaze drones for use in Ukraine. That cooperation was, at first, a one-way street. Iran gives drones, Russia uses them. Simple transactional relationship, and Western governments responded accordingly: sanctions, export controls, public condemnations. The assumption embedded in all of that was that Iran was the junior partner, the supplier of cheap, expendable hardware. Russia was the great power. Iran was the useful vendor. But based on publicly available reporting from U.S. Treasury Department sanctions filings, think tanks like RUSI and the Institute for the Study of War, and investigative journalism from outlets including the Financial Times and Politico, what we are seeing now is something qualitatively different. The relationship has flipped. Russia is no longer just a customer. In my analysis, Russia has become a supplier, and what it's supplying is something Iran has wanted for decades. To understand why this matters, you need a little bit of history. For most of the post-Cold War period, Russia maintained a deliberate policy of strategic restraint when it came to arming Iran. Yes, Russia sold Iran the S-300 air defense system eventually, after years of delays and diplomatic pressure. Yes, Russia built the Bushehr nuclear power plant. But on the really sensitive stuff, advanced fighter aircraft, ballistic missile guidance technology, cutting-edge radar systems, Moscow always held back. Why? Because Russia was playing multiple boards simultaneously. It wanted influence in Tehran, but it also wanted to manage its relationships with Israel, with Gulf states, and with the broader international community. Crossing certain lines with Iran would cost Russia elsewhere. So the restraint was strategic, calculated, deliberate. That calculus has now changed fundamentally, and understanding why it changed is the key to understanding everything that follows. Here's what I think is really happening, and I'm going to break this into 3 points. The first point: the transfer is not just drones anymore. Here's what most people are missing. The drone story broke 2 years ago. It's baked into the public discourse. Analysts, journalists, policymakers, they've all metabolized it. It's no longer news, which means attention has moved on. And that's exactly when the most significant developments tend to happen, when everyone thinks they already understand the story. According to publicly reported sanctions designations from the U.S. Treasury in late 2024, Russian entities have been involved in the transfer of advanced air defense components, radar systems, and critically reported discussions around Su-35 fighter jet technology to Iran. Let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying Iran has Su-35s flying combat missions today. Based on public reports, the timeline and status of that deal remain murky. There are real questions about whether any physical transfer has happened, or whether this is still in the negotiation and technical exchange phase. But here's why it matters regardless. The conversation is happening at all. For decades, that conversation was simply off the table. Russia wouldn't entertain it. The moment Russia begins seriously discussing the transfer of fourth-generation fighter aircraft to Iran, even if no planes have moved yet, that is a strategic signal of the first order. It tells you something has fundamentally changed in how Moscow calculates the costs and benefits of its relationship with Tehran. The restraint is gone, and once you cross that line, you don't uncross it. And it doesn't stop at aircraft. According to reporting from Reuters and confirmed by European Union statements, there are credible public reports of Russian ballistic missile technology knowledge flowing in Iran's direction. Not finished missiles, that would be a different kind of story, but technical expertise, manufacturing processes. The kind of knowledge transfer that doesn't show up on a radar screen or get intercepted at a port, the kind that lives in the heads of engineers and in the documents they carry. This distinction between hardware transfer and knowledge transfer is crucial, and I'll come back to it in detail when I get to my predictions. Because in my analysis, the knowledge transfer is actually the bigger story. Hardware can be destroyed, knowledge cannot. There is also the question of what is flowing in the other direction, because this isn't charity. According to reporting from the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control and multiple investigative outlets, the economic relationship between Russia and Iran has expanded dramatically since 2022, oil, cash, sanctions, evasion, infrastructure. A parallel financial architecture specifically designed to allow both countries to transact in ways that avoid the dollar system and Western oversight. Iran has effectively become one of Russia's most important economic partners, not because the two economies are naturally complementary, but because both are cut off from the West and have a shared interest in building alternative systems, and that economic integration creates its own momentum. The deeper the economic ties, the more incentive Russia has to protect and strengthen Iran as a partner, which means more willingness to transfer capabilities that would previously have been off limits. The second point, Iran's capability ceiling is being raised, and that changes everything. Here's the key insight that I think most analysis is missing. Iran has always been operating under a capability ceiling. This is not an accident. It is the result of decades of deliberate policy by multiple actors: the United States, Israel, the European Union, and yes, Russia, to keep Iranian military technology below a certain threshold. The theory was containment through denial. You can't build what you can't access. And for a long time, it worked. Iran developed an impressive indigenous defense industry. They built drones, they built missiles, they reverse-engineered systems. But there was always a ceiling on how sophisticated those systems could get, without access to foreign technology, without access to advanced components, without access to the knowledge base that comes from decades of high-end defense development. There were limits. In my analysis, Russia is now helping Iran break through that ceiling. Not all at once, not openly, but piece by piece. Why is Russia doing this? 3 reasons, based on public reporting and strategic logic. First, Russia needs Iran as a long-term partner in an increasingly isolated geopolitical position. The worse relations with the West become, the more Russia needs allies who can provide material support, political cover at the UN, and strategic depth in the Middle East. Iran is one of the very few countries willing and able to play that role. That makes Iran extremely valuable to Russia, valuable enough to justify sharing technology that Moscow would never have shared 5 years ago. Second, Russia wants Iran to serve as a strategic pressure point on the United States. An Iran with upgraded military capabilities is an Iran that ties down more U.S. attention, more U.S. resources, more U.S. alliance management bandwidth. Every hour Washington spends managing an increasingly capable Iran is an hour Washington isn't spending on Ukraine or Taiwan or anywhere else Russia cares about. From Moscow's perspective, a stronger Iran is strategically useful. It creates problems for America in a theater where America is already overextended. Third, Russia is almost certainly getting paid not just in drones, but reportedly in cash, oil arrangements, and other forms of economic cooperation that bypass Western sanctions. According to reporting from the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, bilateral economic linkages between the two countries have grown substantially since 2022. Russia is getting real economic value out of this relationship. The military technology transfers are partly compensation for that. This isn't generosity. This is Russia buying strategic leverage and Iran buying capability it could never get on the open market. Now, the implications of a rising Iranian capability ceiling spread well beyond Iran itself. This is the part that I think is genuinely underappreciated. Iran is not just a single actor. Iran is the hub of a network, what analysts call the axis of resistance, that includes Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, various Iraqi Shia militia groups, and other affiliated organizations across the region. Iran is the supplier, the trainer, the financier, and the strategic coordinator. For all of these groups, when Iran's own capabilities improve, those improvements cascade through the network. Better Iranian missiles eventually become better Hezbollah missiles. Better Iranian drones eventually become better Houthi drones. The upgrade of the core propagates outward to the edges, which means the strategic consequences of what Russia is transferring to Iran extend far beyond the borders of Iran itself. They extend to Lebanon, to Yemen, to Iraq, to anywhere that network operates. This is why I think most people are seriously underestimating the significance of this story. they're thinking about Iran in isolation. But Iran is not operating in isolation. Iran is the center of a regional military ecosystem, and when you upgrade the center, you upgrade the whole ecosystem. The third point, what happens next? And I want to be absolutely clear, this is my personal analytical assessment, based on publicly available information. I could be wrong. I encourage you to think critically about everything I'm saying and form your own view. In my analysis, we are likely to see three major developments play out over the next 6 to 18 months. Development 1, Iran's air defense network becomes meaningfully stronger, and that changes the military calculus in the region. Right now, both Israel and the United States maintain a credible military option against Iran's nuclear program and broader military infrastructure. That option depends in part on the ability to penetrate Iranian air defenses. If Iran integrates Russian-origin radar technology and surface-to-air missile components even partially. Even imperfectly, that penetration becomes harder. Not impossible, but harder. And in military planning, harder means more risk, more aircraft, more exposure, more potential casualties. It means the cost of a military strike goes up, and when the cost goes up, the option becomes less attractive, which means Iran gains deterrence. Not through its offensive capabilities, but through its defensive ones. This is a fundamental shift in regional strategic dynamics, and in my analysis, it is already beginning to happen. Development 2, the proxy network gets a capability upgrade. As Iran's own capabilities improve, better guidance systems, longer-range missiles, more sophisticated drone technology, those improvements flow downstream into the network. We've already seen this pattern play out. The Houthis today are using weaponry that is categorically more sophisticated than what they had 5 years ago. Hezbollah's missile arsenal today is categorically more sophisticated than what it had a decade ago. That trajectory continues, and it accelerates as the Russian-Iranian technology relationship deepens. The practical consequence is that U.S. forces, Israeli forces, and Gulf state forces all face a more dangerous threat environment in the coming years, not because of a single dramatic event, but because of a slow, steady accumulation of capability across a distributed network. Development 3, and this is the one I think matters most in the long run. Iran begins to co-produce advanced systems, not just receive them. The most dangerous transfer isn't hardware, it's knowledge, and knowledge doesn't come back. The endgame of this relationship in my analysis is not Iran receiving Russian weapons. That would be significant but ultimately limited. Weapons wear out, weapons can be destroyed, weapons require spare parts and maintenance and can be cut off. The endgame is Iran developing the domestic capacity to produce advanced systems itself based on Russian technical knowledge and manufacturing expertise. That's the scenario that most permanently and irreversibly changes the regional balance of power. Because once Iran can produce these systems indigenously, no sanctions regime, no arms embargo, no export control can stop it. The knowledge is inside Iran, the capacity is inside Iran, and it stays there. There are already public reports from think tanks and investigative outlets of Russian engineers working with Iranian counterparts on manufacturing processes. If that is accurate, we are watching the early stages of exactly this kind of capability transfer in real time, and the implications, if it succeeds, play out over decades, not months. If this analysis is correct, here's what to watch for in the next 30 to 60 days. Watch U.S. and Israeli government statements on Iranian air defense, specifically not Iranian offensive missiles. That language has been consistent for years. Watch for a shift toward more urgent language about Iran's defensive capabilities. If senior officials start talking about Iran as a hardened target rather than just an offensive threat, that tells you they are seeing the same intelligence picture I'm describing. That rhetorical shift would be a significant signal. Watch for new U.S. Treasury or European Union sanctions targeting Russian-Iranian financial and defense networks specifically focused on technology transfer, not just drone supply chains. Sanctions designations are one of the clearest public windows into what Western intelligence believes is actually happening, a new round of designations. That goes beyond drones and into radar, air defense, or missile technology would be a strong confirmation of this analysis. Watch Iranian military exercises and public capability demonstrations. Iran has a consistent pattern of publicly testing new systems, partly for deterrence signaling, partly for domestic political reasons. If you see Iran conducting exercises involving capabilities that look qualitatively different from what they've shown before, particularly in air defense or precision strike, pay close attention. That would suggest the transfers are further along than public reporting has indicated. This is independent analysis, only not news. I could be wrong. I'm working from publicly available information, and I'm giving you my honest read of what it suggests. What's your take? Do you think Russia is crossing a line it can't walk back? Or is this still just transactional? Drop your opinion in the comments. I read everyone. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, subscribe. I post every single day. The preceding content represents independent geopolitical analysis and personal opinion only. It is not news reporting, intelligence, or policy advice. All claims are based on publicly available sources. The analyst may be incorrect. Viewers are encouraged to consult multiple sources and form their own conclusions.